Hello, everyone. This is Reverend Richard Miner. I am the Graduate Engagement Officer at One Spirit Learning Alliance, and I am here with Reverend Sandra Porter Thomas, who is joining me from Costa Rica. Hi, Sandra.
Hi, Richard.
Thank you so much for joining me. I know that you're having a very, very busy week, but as always, you are always willing to take time and do service for One Spirit. So I just want to start by saying thank you for doing this now in the middle of your busy, busy week.
It's my honor. It's my joy.
Well, it's my pleasure to have you here. So I'd like to just sort of jump right in, Sandra. And
okay.
Well, first of all, actually, and I'd like to tell people, I think it's important because for people who don't know who you are, Sandra is my co-pilot for the graduate community call. So for those of you who have joined us on the community calls, you will know Sandra. You're familiar with her. For those of you who haven't, I hope you will join us and meet her there. She does a wonderful, wonderful job, and without her, those calls absolutely would not be possible. So, Sandra, I would like to thank you for doing that and for helping me with that. You are absolutely a wonderful, wonderful co-pilot.
Thank you, Richard.
So, Sandra, can you tell me a little bit about yourself and a little bit about what brought you to One Spirit as a student?
A little bit about myself. Well, I've been on the spiritual seeking journey for many years, and I might even say maybe all my life. But I reached a point several years ago when my seeking started to get a little deeper and a little broader, and the traditional church was not fulfilling to me. I enjoyed going. I enjoyed being in community. I enjoyed the music and the sermons, but I wanted something more. I wanted something that was going to speak to the widest part of me. And I came to One Spirit, or I should say One Spirit kind of found me several different times. And the last time was in 2010. I had not submitted an application, but I had sent off for an application, had begun to fill it out on several different occasions. And in 2010, when I was rummaging around some things, I found an old application and said, oh, okay, I need to revisit this. Mm-hmm. Well, my life was very full at that time. I became engaged and married, and that was going on very beautifully, and my husband and I discovered that he had terminal cancer, as well as stage 4 heart condition. So after being with him and being with all of that, and his passing in 2012, I asked Spirit, okay, so now what? And One Spirit, again, as I was packing up and shifting things around, the application fell out of the box, literally.
Really?
And I knew that was my sign. I knew that this was my time. And in May or June of 2012, I applied and I got in. And so by October, I was a new student, and it changed my life. All of that in such a short period of time just literally turned my life into a whole different place and space, and I'm so much better for it, and I'm so grateful that I finally found home. And that's what One Spirit feels like to me, very much like home.
Well, we are very, very happy to have you as part of our family. And, you know, it's amazing. I should tell our listeners that you live very, very far away. You live in Costa Rica now.
I do. I started out this journey with One Spirit in Charlotte, North Carolina. Mm-hmm. And in 2013, well, let me back up one year. In 2012, my oldest brother, decided he wanted to retire, and he came to Costa Rica, which was fine. And he's calling me and Skyping his baby sister saying, you should come visit. And I was planning on coming to visit in September of 2013 when I got a call saying that he had had a stroke here in Costa Rica. In 7 days of getting that call, I found myself actually on September the 14th, to be exact, to literally be landing in San Jose, Costa Rica. And again, another life-changing event that I really have to say, had I not had a year undergirded by one Spirit, I'm not quite sure how I would have made that. Being in Costa Rica from 2013 to 2014, I was still a One Spirit student and doing it from even a further distance away. And with the webinar sessions that we were having once a month, and being in contact with my study group once or twice a month, that's what got me through that first year of being in recuperation with my brother, who had had a very, very, very massive stroke. And now I'm in a new country and I don't speak Spanish. Didn't then. I speak more now. But I found myself in a new land, in a new home, and I had to navigate that very quickly. And One Spirit was my community. That is how I kind of hung on. And again, I'm very, very grateful for having had that as my base, as my spiritual base, and as a way to deepen my spiritual practice as I began to navigate what it has turned out to be a very long-term caregiving situation with my brother.
Wow. So it sounds like One Spirit really had a deep impact on everything that was happening to you, but it sounds like it had a really important impact on you personally, and that your spiritual journey sort of dovetailed into everything that was happening in your physical life. Can you talk a little bit about your spiritual journey and how One Spirit affected that part of your journey, moving and becoming a caregiver for your brother?
Certainly, Richard. I have always been a pretty deeply spiritual person, as well as at one point in time a religious person. And One Spirit helped me to understand what the difference was. And so moving to a country that is primarily Catholic and also evangelical, I really had to rely on what I was learning through One Spirit about the worldview as spirituality. And that made me go deeper into my own self and made me really stretch and grow beyond what I had already known. My spiritual practice before One Spirit was very sporadic. It was very sporadic. And after I began One Spirit, and for certain after I wound up being in this caregiving situation with my brother, my spiritual practice just really deepened and broadened and became much more regular than what it had been. And that, along with the readings and the connections, the classmate connections, and now that I've been away for a couple of years from being a student, I've met so many more of my wonderful brothers and sisters of One Spirit. I truly do feel the deepness of being in family. And even though the physicality has not been here, I dare say that I'm probably I'm not going to say the only interfaith, interspiritual person, but I'm pretty sure I'm probably the only interfaith or interspiritual minister here in Costa Rica, particularly in the area that I am in. So it's been very important to maintain some aspect of connections to others around the world, and particularly in the places that I have become very familiar with, such as One Spirit, of course, in New York, and my home state of North Carolina, and Charlotte, my city. So the journey has been zigzaggy, if I could call it that, in some ways, and sometimes it's been bouncy. But at the same time, very grounded, very, very grounded. It's because of my journey with and through One Spirit that I can say I know who I am. I am very clear on who I am, and I know what I believe. And I am clear on how I can translate this to others And even though they look at me a little strange when I say I'm an interspiritual, interfaith minister, and they want to know what that means, it gives me great joy to know that I know what that means for me, as I continue to share and to bring some aspect of education and broadening of what that might mean for somebody else.
Yes, you've always struck me as being very, very grounded, and you have really wonderful communication skills, and you have an amazing ability to communicate with a depth of caring and warmth that I've always found really remarkable and really, really a wonderful blessing.
Well, thank you, Richard.
When we're working together and doing projects together, I'm always impressed by your ability to really stay grounded and focused. And now I have a better understanding of where that comes from and why that is so important to you. And I think that's really wonderful. So when you were in all this sort of tumultuous time and you were staying grounded in one spirit, can you tell me what was one or two of your favorite seminary moments, things that either had a very deep impact or things that just stand out in your memory as a wonderful experience?
For me, I think wow, there were so many. Now when I really stop and think about it, there were just so many. But I think the one experience that I had was in the last intensive. So there are two intensives, one in the first year and one in the second year. And the last intensive, and unfortunately I'm not at liberty to go into all the details around it, but in one of the ceremonies that we participated in, it had to do with forgiveness. It had to do with letting go. And I have always been a person that I thought I forgive very well. I don't necessarily forgive very easily, but when I do forgive, I forgive very, very well. And in that particular ceremony, I thought that I had forgiven very, very well, only to discover there was so much more that I needed to work on. And the opening up of my heart, it broke my heart open and allowed the energy of love to simply pierce me. And it was at that particular moment that I knew beyond a shadow of a doubt that this was the right thing for me. That this was the reason why I had gone through all the experiences I had gone through up to that particular point. That was the reason why.
That sounds like a truly amazing
moment. And again, a giant shift happened. And so when all of the wonderfulness that happens around our intensive time together, and then graduation, when I returned to Costa Rica, I was a different person. And I had people to say to me, I stopped off in North Carolina for a little while, but I had people to say to me, "You're not the same person." And I was very honored to be able to say, "Yes, you're correct. I am not the same person."
That's a beautiful story. In the transformation that you had, and the way that your life has changed, and the way that you've changed since you had that moment, what have been your greatest challenges, and what have been the greatest gifts for you since that time?
I think the greatest gifts, I'll start with the gifts. The greatest gifts has been discovering so many other people who are now like me. I used to think there was nobody else like me. And I used to feel and there were times when I felt very alone. And now I know that there are so many people that are so much like me, that are my brothers and sisters in one spirit, but there are also so many other people who are interspiritual, interfaith ministers or leaders that are so much more like me. And that is such a wonderful feeling to know that I can find books now that read me. I can now I can go on the internet and search and find information that speaks to me and who I am. And that's just been a wonderful, wonderful gift to be receiving after coming out of the space of feeling like there was no one like me. Challenges. Challenges. I think some of the greatest challenges that I've had is recognizing that I still have work to do on myself. And I guess that's also a gift as well. But in the beginning, it's a challenge. Because I'd like to think I've done a lot of work. I'd like to think I've moved a little bit on my spectrum that I call being a spiritual being, having a spiritual experience in this human form. I'd like to think I've moved along that continuum just a little bit. And I have. But sometimes it's very challenging to recognize, to have brought to me another piece of work that I need to do, another piece of information for my own personal growth. And I know that the information that comes to me for my personal growth is information that is coming to me also for someone else's personal growth as well. I just may not have met them yet. So I'm storing information or putting it in a catalog or creating a little library because I'm clear that someone else is coming along that I'm going to need to impart something of that information to them. But getting that information and doing the work around it, no, I don't really want to do that. But I have to. But I do.
I'm with you on that. There are times I don't want to do the work.
Sometimes it's so painful, Richard. I'm like, really, universe? Really? Seriously? You want me to do that? Oh, come on. Didn't I finish that already?
I like to have it done.
I don't have to do that. So this, and truly how I am saying what I'm saying to is how I speak to God, is how I speak to spirit, how I speak to the universe. I'm like, sit right here on the edge of my bed and let's have a conversation about this. But in the end, it turns into a gift. And so I do believe that all challenges have the energy of becoming a gift when I choose to see it in a different way, to see it through a different prism, to have a different perspective on it. So yeah, that's probably my biggest challenge myself.
Well, I know, having worked with you in a spiritual environment, you do seem very grounded, and you seem very stable and sure of yourself, and you have a wonderful presence that has a tendency. I know that you make me feel very calm and secure. So I think that you have that same effect on other people as well. Now, you mentioned that you think you've moved a little bit from point A to point B during the course of your spiritual journey, since you've been going through all these, really, it sounds like some very traumatic and difficult challenges in the last 7 years. What do you think has shifted for you that would be the most important shift in the course of the last, say, 7 years, from the time you thought about One Spirit until now? Where have you shifted the most, that you feel the most satisfaction, or the most the most advancement, where you've come the furthest?
In the space of surrender.
In
the space of surrender. I have grown up with the words and songs and images of what surrender is or was. And then I was challenged, as a matter of fact, and I'm still being challenged this year, in the reading of a book by Dr. David R. Hawkins. It's called Letting Go, The Path of Surrender. And it isn't so much that he's saying anything different than what I have heard before. It is how he has put it together, how he breaks it down and brings it all back together. And the reading of all of this has helped me to understand how much I truly did not understand surrender. That was the first thing. But then it turns around and helps me to understand better what I need to surrender and why I need to surrender and what the benefits will be when I do and how much more free I will be when I really and truly lay it down. You know, we hear talk about, I've heard things, particularly in the Christian tradition, of laying your burdens down at the foot of the cross. And I truly thought I understood what that meant. And I remember hearing the preachers talk about, when you lay your burdens down, don't pick them back up again, leave them there, so that God, in this case, so that Jesus could take care of them. Well, I considered myself a pretty good person of letting go until I started reading David Hawkins' book. And I recognized that in the space of what I understood surrender to be, I had so much more to do. I had so much more letting go. He talks about how we can become emotionally entrapped, and how our emotions can become the rule of our lives, and how our emotions can determine what our definitions are. And as I've begun to read and continue to read, I realized that a part of what happens with my emotions, and I'll speak to myself personally, is that my ego gets wrapped up in there somewhere.
Sure.
And ego wants to play out something. And ego does not want to surrender. And that was the biggest thing that you talk about ahas. That was the biggest aha I got for myself. And I'm like, oh, okay. So I've got a little more work to do in that area. And so many different ahas are coming through, continuing to come through for me, of how important it is to truly let go, as the phrase says, and truly let God do what God knows how to do best. And that I have to learn how to get out of the way and stay out of the way. That's surrender.
Well, you make it sound very, very clear. But I know that for me personally, it is a huge challenge because I want to take my will back too. It's very easy to surrender for a minute or for a day, but to really, really do it, to really lay it down and leave it there for a long period of time, it's truly a challenge. And
it is.
I wish you the very best with that.
Well, thank you.
I think I'm going to get the book, by the way. I want to read this because it sounds like it's really fascinating.
It really is a fascinating approach to understanding deeper what surrender is all about. And it is not, and I just want to say this, that the book itself, his writing itself, and he says this also, has nothing to do with religion at all. So it matters not what belief system you come from or you come through. We all have these challenges in and around the space of surrender. And that for me spoke even more volumes.
Well, that's one of the threads that runs through all of the major faith traditions that we've studied. There are several of them, but that's one of the really, really big ones, is surrendering your will and your ego to God. And I think it's one of the greatest challenges that we face. Certainly, I know it's one of the greatest challenges that I face. So I know that you are in the middle of a move right now, in addition to all the other plates you have spinning right now. But I'm curious to find out, in addition to working with surrender, what is next for you? What is coming up in the future for Sandra?
Well, what is coming up next for me is deepening my practice, another practice of healing energy. I've been on another path of becoming a healing energy practitioner for several years now. And I had this wonderful opportunity in this great, beautiful place Playas del Coco in Costa Rica to do this. And so this is the next piece for me, of helping people to get clearer on how energy works, how everything is energy, and energy is everything, and how allowing ourselves to, again, open and surrender to the energy, that so much healing happens because we simply allow this process to happen. So I'm doing this through a program called Healing Touch, and located in Texas, coming out of Texas. And everything I'm doing right now is actually over the internet. My mentor is actually in Charlotte, North Carolina. My clients are here in Costa Rica. Home office is in Texas. And there's only one other Healing Touch person here in Costa Rica. So it's been quite an adventure of doing these new things, these first things in this great rich coastland. So that's my next piece. And probably in connection with that, or in conjunction with that, I will be working more to offer spiritual counseling or spiritual direction to people who are here as a part of the other formal hat of ministry that I do. And that has been a very interesting undertaking as well. I have many friends who are English speakers, American and Canadian, and I have many friends now that are Spanish speaking, of which I am continuing to learn more of my Spanish. So it's going to be very beautiful to see how my ministry in healing energy and ministry in spiritual counseling and spiritual direction continues to unfold in a language that I am still learning.
Wow, that is quite an adventure you have there. You're truly taking some big chances, and I have to say I really admire your courage and your strength. And I know that you're doing a lot of work with One Spirit as well. You do a lot of service for your community, the international One Spirit community. And we've only got a couple of minutes left, but I wonder if you might have anything that you want to say about doing that work.
Absolutely. My original intention, Richard, when I came out, when I started One Spirit, my original intention was to move to the New York City area in some way, shape, or form, and to actually become a part of the brick and mortar of One Spirit. That had been my original intention. I was planning on volunteering. I was planning on, in my second year, I was planning on coming more to the classes, in the classroom, doing the classroom aspect, and of course, Spirit had other things planned, and I'm grateful that the technology angels have been able to allow this aspect of internet to actually happen, the communication that happens here. So that was my original thought and plan. And because that was not, I was not able to do that, I have not been able to do that, I so recognize the importance of volunteering. And when it came time to volunteer for something, I knew that I wanted to work with the alumni in some way, shape, or form. I didn't know what that was going to be about. Didn't know what it was going to be like. Didn't know who I was going to be involved with, but I knew it was something that I wanted to do. I also knew that I wanted to do mentorship, and I did that for a couple of years. Beautiful, wonderful work.
Yep.
So I just want to say, as one of the last things, I want to encourage all of our One Spirit brothers and sisters, if you have not, to think creatively and to find something, one thing that you can do for One Spirit on behalf of one spirit. If it's hosting an open house, that's a wonderful thing to be able to do. If it's sharing information with someone who's interested or someone who is seeking a different way of knowing, that's a wonderful thing to do. If it's working with the Alumni Association, or now that we have our retreat coming up, I'm sure that there's many hands that are still needed in that aspect.
Absolutely.
So I just want to encourage to find ways that you can give back. It isn't all about monetary, and it isn't all about being physically present in the actual physical body present. But what I do know is that any of your presence is a wonderful gift, and that being one spirit and being in one spirit means that we all have an opportunity to move forward on our individual and collective growth.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much for sharing that. And again, Sandra, thank you so much for taking the time out of your crazy busy schedule.
Oh, thank you, Richard. Thank you for pulling me away from all the packing.
Well, I'm looking forward to seeing you again very soon on our community call. And I want to thank you, Sandra, for joining us. And thank you again for all the wonderful, wonderful service that you do for the One Spirit community. And I will look forward to talking to you again very, very soon.
Thank you so much for having me, Richard. You have a wonderful evening.
You too. Love and blessings.
Love and blessings.
Bye.
Bye.